Right now, 52 people are dying every hour from violence somewhere on this planet. The news feeds you stories about murder, war, and brutality 24 hours a day. It can feel like we are living in the most dangerous time in human history. But here's what the science actually says. We might be living through one of the most peaceful periods our species has ever known. And to understand why, we have to go back, way back, to a time when being human meant something terrifying. Today, less than 1% of all human deaths are caused by violence. When researchers studied our prehistoric ancestors, they found an average of over 3 times that, and during some periods, 20 times more violent than today. 20 times. So what happened? Why were ancient humans so brutally violent, and why does it still matter today? Let's start with a man named Otzi. 5,000 years ago, Otzi was hiking through the Tyrolean Alps, the cold mountain range between modern Italy and Austria. He carried a copper axe, a bow and arrows, and flint knives. His body showed signs of a hard life, scarred, beaten, worn down. But one day, high in those freezing peaks, Otzi felt the pointed end of an arrow pierce his shoulder from behind. He bled out in the snow. 5,000 years later, scientists found his frozen body perfectly preserved in the ice. And what they discovered changed how we understand prehistoric violence. The arrowhead had severed a major artery. Cuts and bruises on his hands and wrists suggested a fight 1 or 2 days before his death. There was trauma to his skull, possibly a final blow as he lay dying. And the blood of 4 other people was found on his equipment. Otzi wasn't just murdered. He was tracked, hunted, and finished off in the mountains by someone who followed him for days. 5,000 years ago, premeditated, calculated, lethal. But Otzi is just the beginning. Let's go back even further. 500,000 years ago. In the mountains of Spain, at a site called Cima de los Huesos, the Pit of the Bones, archaeologists found the remains of at least 28 individuals, early Neanderthals. Our evolutionary cousins who lived alongside us for tens of thousands of years before going extinct. Most were young adults, teenagers to early 30s, a sign of just how brutal life was. Few made it past that age. But one skull told a particularly dark story. Cranium 17, a male. His skull had 2 deep fractures just above the left eye socket, almost identical in shape and size, caused by blunt force trauma, likely a stone or a club. The fractures were in almost the same position, which means the same weapon was used twice, in quick succession, deliberately. He was struck once, and then struck again to make sure. This may be the oldest case of intentional murder ever discovered, 500,000 years ago. And it already looks premeditated. Now fast forward to 10,000 years ago, Kenya. At a site called Nataruk, on the edge of what was once a lake, attackers massacred an entire community. At least 27 people were killed. Men, children, a pregnant woman. The absence of many female skeletons suggests women of childbearing age were taken rather than killed. Blunt force trauma to skulls. Arrow tips embedded in bone. Some bodies found with their hands still in the position of someone who had been bound. And the weapons used? Not local materials. The attackers traveled to get there. This was not a spontaneous fight. This was a raid. Organized, planned, targeted at a community that had fertile land and food near a lake. They had what the raiders wanted, so the raiders took it. By massacre. 10,000 years ago, no armies, no governments, no nations, just humans deciding to annihilate other humans for resources. To answer that, we need to look at our closest relatives. In 1974, deep in the forests of Tanzania, something extraordinary happened. A community of chimpanzees had split into 2 groups, the Kasakela and the Kahama, and what followed was a 4-year war. The Kasakela chimps didn't just fight the Kahama, they hunted them. Small coordinated groups would patrol the border, wait until a Kahama chimp was completely alone, then surround and attack as a gang. Systematically, deliberately. One by one, the Kahama chimps were killed until the entire group was gone, their territory absorbed. This wasn't random aggression. This was strategic violence. Coordinated, patient, lethal. And the reason it matters so much is this. Chimpanzees share 98 to 99% of their DNA with us. When we see chimps wage strategic war, we are looking at something that was present in our common ancestor millions of years ago. We didn't invent violence, we inherited it. So is violence literally written into our genes? Researchers found something called monoamine oxidases, enzymes that break down neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, the chemicals that control mood, pleasure, and aggression. Variations in the genes that produce these enzymes have been linked to increased aggression in both animals and humans. But here's where it gets complicated. No single gene makes someone violent. What the genes do is create a potential, a capacity. Whether that capacity is expressed depends on environment, upbringing, stress, trauma, and 100 other factors. We carry the code for violence in our DNA because violence helped our ancestors survive. It helped them defend territory, win mates, protect children. Natural selection kept the genes because the genes worked. But natural selection also kept something else. Here's what nobody talks about when they discuss human violence. We are getting less violent dramatically. During the Mesolithic period, roughly 10,000 to 5,000 years ago, up to 15% of human deaths were caused by other humans. Today, that number is less than 1%. That is not a small change. That is one of the most significant behavioral shifts in the history of our species. And researchers believe they know why, something called self-domestication. In ancient human groups, leaders who were too aggressive, too dominant, too brutal got removed. Not by war, by coalition. Lower status members would talk, build consensus, and collectively eliminate the bully. The aggressive, violent alpha male stopped being the most successful type of human. The collaborative, calm, intelligent human became the winner. Natural selection slowly began favoring the less reactive, the more cooperative. Over hundreds of thousands of years, we domesticated ourselves. So here's what 500,000 years of human violence actually tells us. Ancient humans were capable of extraordinary brutality, planned murders, organized massacres, strategic wars fought with patience and coordination. But the same species that did all of that also built languages to resolve conflict without fighting, built communities to protect the vulnerable, built systems to replace personal vengeance. We carry both of those things inside us. The capacity for violence is real. It is ancient. It is written into us by millions of years of survival pressure. But so is the capacity for peace. And over time, slowly, imperfectly, with plenty of terrible exceptions, peace has been winning. The question isn't whether we are violent by nature.